Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Solange called A Seat at the Table. So I wasn't really planning to review this album. Part of this is my schedule right now. My stack of albums to cover over the next few weeks has reached a frankly staggering height. And there are albums that I've had to just cross off my list purely out of necessity at this point, or delay till the very end of the year when I typically do a little bit more catch up. And even then, there was going to be some records on which I was generally ambivalent or didn't show the same sort of evolution to make a review worthwhile that I'd probably put aside anyways. And for the most part, I was intending to do this for the newest album from Solange Knowles, the younger sister of Beyonce, an artist for whom I've been pretty lukewarm on in the past at best. Part of this is some historical context. Her debut album Solo Star in 2002 was a slice of underwhelming hip-hop inspired R&B in an era where that was really the norm, and when she followed it up in 2008 with a generally tasteful retro throwback record on Soul Angel and the Hadley Street Dreams, well, it was definitely good, but it wasn't an album I often felt inclined to revisit. It was pleasant, the lyrics were interesting, and I appreciate that Solange was generally making more subtle and interesting and listenable music than her sister was in the 2000s. Keep in mind, I haven't really liked Beyonce until fairly recently, but going back to Solange, I was just never really gripped by her albums. I don't think she was helped by Janelle Monáe coming around a few years later with a very similar vocal style, and yet more impressive production, writing, ideas, charisma, pretty much across the board. And yet from there, well, outside of the tabloids, I didn't really hear a lot from Solange. But it became very clear researching this record that just because I wasn't listening doesn't mean that Solange was not working on projects. First with an EP True, co-written with Deb Hines in 2012, and now this, which is won over volumes of critical acclaim, including some recommendations from unexpected sources, and spurred a tidal wave of requests from you guys. And hey, 8 years is a pretty impressive distance between albums, and if this record is as socially conscious and potent as was suggested, it could make for a really powerful listen. So I decided to check out A Seat at the Table. What do we get? Well, this is the sort of album where there is no easy way for me to talk about it. It's certainly an album that made me think a lot about the concepts and ideas behind it, particularly how they're presented with respect to Solange's audience, partially because she's so acutely aware of the composition of that audience, and partially because of the subject matter that this album is exploring in detail. I'm also very much aware right out of the gate that more than any other Solange project, that this is not meant for me. And I'm not going to disparage her for that. But as such, when I say that for me this album is very good but not great, there are two qualifications I'm making. One, it doesn't have anything to do with the themes and writing of this album, most of which I can entirely get behind. And two, the audience for whom this album is intended will probably absolutely adore it, and there's no denying that A Seat at the Table probably speaks to them on a much deeper level than it does for me, and really, that's fine. So to add some context to all of that, we're going to switch things up a little bit and start off with the lyrics and themes first. And you know what? I hate to do this, but let's get the inevitable Beyonce side of things out of the way first. A Seat at the Table is an interesting inversion of the thematic focus that Beyonce took on Lemonade, where Lemonade was at its core a relationship drama interspersed with a potent social narrative about black women. Solange takes the social narrative and she puts it front and center, peppering the album with some well-spoken connecting interludes from Master P, and the only real guest verse is coming from Lil Wayne, sounding more on point than he has in years on Mab, and a dualistic verse from BJ the Chicago Kid and The Dream on For Us By Us, which is a great addition to an already great song. And that thematic focus is to explore healing and self-empowerment by black women, for black women, reclaiming a certain inner peace and control against a world that would ignore, erase, or marginalize them. It's very much analogous to themes that Jamila Woods approached earlier this year on Heaven, and they both use the same Paula Cole interpolation from Dawson's Creek, which I thought was kind of nifty. But Solange is also a much more straightforward writer, and arguably cuts to some sharper insights. Originally, I was kind of thrown off by Mad and how she approached the song with more tiredness than anything else, and really not a lot of anger, but it makes sense as she tells her friend questioning her anger that she's done taking the impetus to explain things to the audience. She has the right to be angry, and damn the stereotype, but she just can't at this point. It's not worth it anymore. And that's consistent across this entire album. While there are songs like Don't Touch My Hair, which digs into that particular microaggression, the larger theme isn't so much escape as it was with Jamila Woods, but moving on, and not caring if she leaves a white audience that might have loved True but doesn't get this record behind. And as songs like Don't You Wait indicate, indicate she's done with sweet nothings and she's not obliged to keep feeding white culture easy music. Similar thing for For Us By Us, where the culture ignores or marginalizes them for so long, and they're tempted to either react with aggression or pleas for acceptance, as the BJ Chicago Kid or The Dream verse illustrates. The third path that Solange takes is to carve out her own lane. Don't feel bad if you can't sing along, white people, you got the world in front of you anyways. And between that song and the Andre 3000 contributions on the excellent Junie about cultural appropriation, and the interlude Tina Taught Me from Solange's mother speaking about how much black positivity really isn't reverse racism, and Don't Wish Me Well, she makes it clear that she's not against white culture enjoying or embracing her music. But we're not going to be the primary focus anymore, and you have to put in some work to actually understand it. And while I've covered records that have touched on this or conveyed it in subtext in the past, this is probably the first album I've really dug into where it's come across this acutely for me. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Hell, it's probably the closest that I'll ever get to feeling like how some black audiences feel when culture ignores them entirely. It's discombobulating to be sure, but and then again, I don't really mind being on the outside looking in and trying to make the effort to understand and really appreciate that much more, even though I appreciate that it's not for me. I'm not always the primary actor here. I just wish I could connect with the music more. Part of this is Solange herself. Yes, her singing is beautiful and organic, and a lot of the multi-tracking is really pretty, but I'm not grabbed by her charisma as much as I'd like to be. Most because this album is much more reliant on its content for its edge rather than the performances, and she really plays kind of middle of the road the entire way across. She's got a huge range, but I'm not grabbed by anything visceral here. The sharpest edges come through in a lot of the production. Sharper snares crop up on the self-acceptance of the vulnerability on Rise, or against the cello and constant search for escape from impenetrable iron clouds on Cranes in the Sky, or the sandy yet blocky beat on Mad, or against the Benny and the Jets interpolation on Where Do We Go. And then we get this synth with more of an edge against the 80s-esque bass and atmosphere of Don't You Wait that cuts in again on the funk touches of Junie, or the sharper electronic keys of Don't Wish You Wish Me Well. And really, a lot of the piano lines in this album are really pretty as well, especially on songs like For Us By Us and Where Do We Go, or the fluttery keys on Borderline and Ode to Self-Care. I can't say I'm always wild about the interplay between some of the synths and the more organic instrumentation here, especially with that odd beeping added to Weary, or that wiry synth added to Don't Touch My Hair. But the larger issue with this album, while it runs under an album, it definitely feels a lot longer. And you get the impression that a tighter edit might have intensified the impact of some of these themes, especially as a lot of these songs don't really come to incredibly powerful hooks. And the placement of songs like Scales, probably the weakest track here, even despite the really sweet vocal interplay between Solange and Kelela. And near the very end of the album, it does not help the record maintain momentum and ends things on an oddly downbeat note, even beyond Master P's triumphant closing piece. And on that note, even though I really do like Master P's interludes for a lot of their content, and he's actually a pretty decent speaker, they don't really exactly help the momentum on the sound that plays to a very meditative, languid pace. But then again, I can almost guarantee that the main audience for this album will not care about the pace or the atmosphere. And again, that's fine. This is an album that establishes that Solange doesn't remotely care what I or anyone else thinks about her musical direction, which, again, for the most part, I can actually appreciate. This is a thought-provoking, very well-produced album that can feel a little bit bloated and slow at points, but overall does show a creative direction that breathes originality and poise into Solange's career going forward. Knowledgeable and reflective of the past and history that inspired it, but forward-looking. And as such, for me, it's a very strong 7 out of 10, but I absolutely recommend it, especially for some white audiences who could use a perspective shakeup. Because if you might find this album a culture shock, well, this might have been long in coming. And Solange, she's moving on regardless. If you want to keep following some pretty fascinating and pretty damn good music regardless, recommend you keep up. So check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I got the poll up here. Yes, I can imagine this album will play a lot better for some of you, so you can show me there. But I'm also curious if you guys think that it just didn't come through as much as you wanted to, and let's try to avoid the Beyonce comparisons. They're in two very different lanes of R&B at this point. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.